And William, I'm going to expand on your prayer a little bit. I'm going to open that invitation to not just our guests hearing the word and wanting to come back, but everybody wanting to come back. But it is good to be able to get back together again this evening, even though it seems like our numbers keep dwindling as the week goes on. You know, Sunday morning you get the boom, and then it downhill from there. Hadn't figured that process out yet, but maybe one day I'll figure it out and be able to uh, come up with a solution. Who knows? But for this evening, for those of us that are here or who get to watch it later on from the recordings, either case, we're going to look through 1 Corinthians chapter 12. And this idea for this evening's lesson came from after Wednesday night Bible study. We had a guest from Roosevelt Street was actually stopped here. He was running late, and I think they have services before we do. And so he stopped in here so that he could get his midweek Bible study in. And we were able to talk afterwards. So it was encouraging to be able to fellowship with him and to make various discussions. And one of them kind of led me to the idea of this lesson of parts and positions. It got me thinking about how it takes many different people and different talents for the church to grow and function. So taking a quick look at Christ's picks of his apostles and how they worked together was an element that I wanted to look at and dive into, and I quickly realized that there wasn't a lot of details about the apostles to really dig into, because the focus wasn't about their lives, it was about how Christ came to teach, but there are some details that we get to look at. So quickly looking at it before we get into 1 Corinthians 12, I just want to look at the idea of the apostles themselves. And when we look at the breakdown, and I'm trying to make as good a list as I can, but initially there were 12 men selected. Now there were many that followed Christ, but there were 12 that he picked to be his apostles. After Judas's suicide, a replacement was selected in Acts chapter 1 for Matthias. And then we see Paul was added later on, and as he says, he was born out of due time. So he was not with the primary 12. He was not, there at the day of Pentecost as an apostle. He might have been there, we don't know. But him being a Pharisee, he was likely around quite a bit to, if nothing else, keep an eye on things. So we see the interactions there, but when we stop and look at the professions of these 14 men, only a couple are actually listed. 4 of them were listed as fishermen. 1 was a publican or tax collector. 1 was a zealot. And then we have Paul, who was a Pharisee, and also in his previous engagements, a tent maker. The others we don't see, at least not that I could find or notice that we have any professions listed. So one thing we see is that none of them were professional religious people. They were not pulled out of the background of being groomed for the priesthood or something of that nature. I guess Paul would be the closest to that as a Pharisee, but exactly what he did, I don't know. We don't know if he was, So looking at those, another point to be illustrated as we look at our congregations, as we look at who do we accept. Well, we don't have any requirements except for that they accept the Word of God. And that is exactly what Christ did. He even had 2 people that typically in life would not talk to one another. We usually glance past that, but if we look at the historical nature of this, the publican and the zealot are on opposite sides of the fence. The publicans were the tax collectors for Rome, but yet the zealots believe that we should not owe any taxes because there's only one God, and Caesar's not it. And he thinks of himself as a god and as a king, but there's only one, and that is not ours. And so to think about that one, 2 men that would typically never sit in the same room together were part of his 12. That did not affect Christ picking of who he chose. So we need to be mindful of this as we go about our lives, go about, out and about. We also see that there were different members of the family that were there. There were two sets of brothers, James and John, and Simon and Andrew. And at least one of the apostles was married. And we see that with Jesus visiting Peter's house, and his mother-in-law was ill. There's only one way to have a mother-in-law. So, it doesn't say Peter's wife, it doesn't, but we can see the relation. So it doesn't seem to really matter what our background is and what our status is, or who the person next to us is. The question is, do we answer the call of God and of Christ himself, in this case here, as he was picking out his people? So with this idea, with the, coming from the idea of the background of the different apostles that were there, I started thinking about it, and then the study brought me into 1 Corinthians chapter 12, where I look at it and it says it takes many people with various backgrounds and abilities for the church to grow. It's not just a one-person show. It's not just a one ideal. It's not just, you've got to come from this religious mindset in order to do this. We have people from all different walks of life, even ones that oppose each other, working together. What kind of lesson should that teach us today? It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter what race we are, what gender we are, what color we are, what anything we are. The only part that matters is, are we following Christ? Are we listening to what he has to say? And as we look at through 1 Corinthians chapter 12, we get to see some of this. So with the various backgrounds and abilities, we may each have different abilities, but we all serve the same God. As we start in chapter 12, verse 4, it says, there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are differences of ministries, but the same Lord. There are diversities of activities, but it is the same God who works in all. Whichever element we have, I mentioned this morning about the parable of the talents, how there are three different men depicted. One had a talent, one had 2 talents, one had 5 talents to start with, and then 2 of them were able to increase in their talents. One of them decided to just go buried in the ground and not do anything. We each have different abilities. If I was the 1 talent person, I looked at someone who had 5, I'm like, well, I'm not as good as him. Or let's even look at it at when he comes back to collect. Now I'm still sitting at 1, and I come in and I see someone with 10. Man, that person can do a lot. I can't do all that. That's not the point. The point is, what do we do with ours? Because there are diversities of gifts and differences of ministries. Looking through the Bible, what do we see? We have some that are apostles. We have some that are disciples that are going out and about. They're traveling from city to city. They're able to speak. They're able to preach. We have Aquila and Priscilla who taught someone more perfectly the Word. Independent Bible studies. You've got public sermons. You have independent Bible studies. You have Dorcas who is making clothing for those in need. We have people that had plentiful that were able to sell some of their possessions and give to the poor. We have some that gave all that they could. The widow and her 2 mites. We have all different elements and ideas of various ministries, various ways of being able to give, and they're all giving to the same cause. They're giving to that one Spirit, to that same Lord, to the same God who works in all. If we're following God, there's different ways that we can turn ourselves into a servant of His. What is our talent? And that's something we have to discover. We have to figure out what it is. Sometimes it is encouraged upon us as we go here and there. I'll give myself as an example. I'm speaking to you today. I was asked many years ago, right after I became a Christian, by someone who asked every male this question, apparently, you gonna be a preacher? It's like, I just became a Christian. I've not thought that far ahead yet. It's like, that doesn't sound like me right now. Okay, a few years later, okay, hello everyone, I'm now standing in front of you. Um, but what is our talent? Not everyone can stand up here every Sunday or lead the Bible study class, but what is our ability? What is our ministry? There are many ways to reach out. And as that, we each have different abilities from the Spirit that are listed to show all work in harmony. The different abilities will work together. And starting in verse 7 through 11, we see, but the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for profit to all. Now here they still had the gifts, but we can still learn something from this today. For one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge through the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another different kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to each one individually as he wills. So as the Spirit was handed out, as the laying out of hands by the apostles, each one got a different task. Each one got a different gift at that time. Do we not have something similar today? Now, we don't have the apostles' laying of hands today, but do we not have different understandings? Do we not have different abilities? We just have to look at it and adapt it for today, but do we not have some of the same? If every one of us was a great pulpit preacher, then where would the encouragement be? Where would the bereavements, the thoughtfulness for bereavements, where would be the independent Bible studies? Where would be any of the other tasks of the congregation? If all of us were all excellent at only one thing, where would the edification be? Because we each have different backgrounds, someone coming in and saying, hey, I need help with this, we can find someone that more closely matches that we can work with one another. And the way that it says is of the same Spirit. We don't have multiple spirits. We don't have multiple ways or multiple religions or multiple churches or multiple. It's all one. Which means if these are all coming from one, we should all be unified in one. As we look at verses 12 through 14, it's, one of the points I pull out of this is that there is one Christ, one body, one goal, but it takes many members to accomplish that working together. So as it goes through from verses 12 through 14, for as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit were we all baptized into one body, whether Jew or Greek, slave or free, have all been made to drink into one Spirit. For in fact, the body is not one member, but many. The church is not one individual person. The church is all the people working together for the cause of Christ. Since we're working for the cause of Christ, we're working for the cause of God, for the Father. We are many, but as many, we are also one. We are each independent and individual, but we're all working to the same goal. We each have different tasks, talents, contributions that we can offer. We can't be afraid to offer what we have to serve the church. Are we nervous about trying something new? Probably so. That is the way of life. That is the way most people are. I'm not sure about this. But let's put away that self-doubt. Let's put away the concerns and let's look at what God has in store for us. 15 through 19 is talking about the doubt. It looks like if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I'm not of the body. Why are we comparing each other to different parts? Basically, that section right there, if the whole body were one part, then where's the body? It's been quite interesting to look at some new technology pieces here lately. That we're now in the upcoming generation of AI and all this artificial intelligence, and People are afraid that AI is going to take over everything. I'll tell you, it ain't there yet. We're not to the point of the Terminator movies where it's going to take over the world and try and destroy humankind. It can't even draw a human being correctly. I've seen too many pictures of times where it says, and you put in a prompt saying, put a person on the beach looking at this, and all of a sudden, the person has 3 hands. There's only one person in the picture, but you see their hands like this, but you also see a third hand reached around like this, but there is no other body. I'm like, that person's got too many body parts. There's too many things going on here. There's something not right. So, we have all of these things and all this stuff, but if everything was one part, where's anything else? If everyone were a missionary and left out of here tonight to go to some other land, what would happen to this congregation? There'd be no one in the congregation to support the congregation, to support the missionaries. We need a blend of different people. We need this blend. So he illustrates it by saying the foot, the hand, the eye, the ear, the smell, the nose. We need all these elements. Think about our daily life. When we have an injury and we can't use a body part, how much does that hinder us? How do we have to adapt? Everyone else, all the other body parts have to work harder to make up for that. Imagine Judy, she can't use her leg, which means she can't get up. Now what happens? The daily life has to change. When, you hurt the hand and it goes into a cast, especially if it's your primary hand, now what? I can't write. I can't sign my name. I can't type on the keyboard. I can't go and open up my car door because this is the hand I always use. Now I'm reaching across and doing all these extra things. What happens when we try to all do the same thing? Other things will be falling through. What happens if we don't try for ourselves? We let ourselves doubt. We let ourselves compare ourselves to other body parts. We don't need to compare ourselves to one another, and this is one of the key reasons why. Our journey is an individual journey, but it's also a group journey. Like this morning's lesson, we look back a year before, see where we were. Have we grown? Have I grown? It's not about have I grown compared to you. It's each of us are taking this race on our own. What are we doing about it? We should also honor one another and support each other. We cannot put down another member for any reason. If another member is struggling, we help pick them up instead of doing something else. We can't cast off a body part just because, they're struggling at this time. I hurt my wrist doesn't mean that I cut it off and say goodbye. I try and help it, try and nurture it back along. As we look verses 20 through 26, he talks about, yet there are many members, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. Much rather, those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, on these bestow greater honor. Would we expect a new convert into Christ, someone who is new to learning about God, to be at the same level as someone who has been studying for 20 years and working in the field? Would we expect those two to be on even ground? Or would we expect one to be maybe a little bit weaker in the service? They're learning. As Paul describes in another spot, he talks about, as babes desire the sincere milk, and then there's a progression to solid food. One member's on solid food, the other one's on milk. We can't expect them to be at the same spot. So just because of that, we call them a weaker member. Let's cast them aside. We need that member. We need every member to be able to grow, and so that way the church can grow. It can continue to live on and go forward. How has the church lived this many years? By nurturing and respecting each member, by allowing everyone to be able to grow and to find their talents, to be able to understand the one body be incorporated in. We have to remember that we're all part of Christ's body and need to strive to serve Him the best way that I started by putting we, but I want to emphasize also the best way I can. Each one of us should have that statement of that, how can I serve Him? And by me serving Him and us all being united in one body, we serve Him in harmony. Verses 27 through 31, now you are the body of Christ and members individually. And God has appointed these in the church, first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, after that miracles, then gifts of healing, helps, administrations, varieties of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Are all workers of miracles? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? We know the answer to those questions are all no. No, not everybody has one position. Not everyone has the same gift. So in verse 31, he wraps up by saying, but earnestly desire the best gifts. And yet I show you a more excellent way. To me, when I read that, desire the best gifts, I think that could be something individual to each one of us. Which gift is appropriate for me? Which gift do I have the ability to do? And that gift may change over time. You know, at one point I might be able to stand up here and do this. At another point I may not. Maybe all I can do is sit behind my computer and just use my hand and type on the keyboard. Maybe I lose my voice in some way. I'm thinking of a movie where, you know, this person is in a great leadership position, but he can't talk. Because I think it never really says, but probably like a throat cancer or something to that effect, he has lost the ability to speak. He can use the computer. He types out his questions and stuff on the computer. He makes conversation. He can still do something, he just has to change the way he does it. Do we get that way sometimes in life? Sometimes we're able to do one thing now, but later on, through what we're doing now, we either grow into something else or we have to modify what we do. But yet he shows us a more excellent way. Don't look at trying to be one another. Be the part that you are. Help the church to be one and united. No matter our background or our talents or what our future holds, we can continue into chapter 13, and I'll leave this for personal study, to go into 13 and see what all we do through loving service to God. It's not just about showing up, checking the boxes, and going home. Christ made that very clear in his Sermon on the Mount, his very first public sermon. It's continued to be made clear here. How many times does Paul say in Corinthians 13, if I have not love, then it's worthless? We have to do it out of loving service to him. Do we feel like we shouldn't be called a servant of God because of something that we've done in our past? You know, sometimes we think about, and I hear this statement that, well, God could never forgive me, or I'm because of this, or there's an excuse there. There's something there that's trying to be a roadblock. Paul gives his own self-evaluation for everybody to know about. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 9 and 10, for I am the least of the apostles, who am not worthy to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace towards me is not in vain. But I labored more abundantly than they all. Yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. He says, I labored, but it wasn't me laboring. It was the grace of God through me. Because of the grace of God, I should not be able to be an apostle. I should not be who I am. I should not be accepted by God, but because of his grace I am. And therefore, because he first loved me, I love him. And I will do what he wants me to do. I will be the part of the body that I am at this particular time, and I will work my job and I will try to build up the other members. Will we do the same? Do we know what our part is? Do we know where we fit in our ministry and our ability to reach out to others and to be able to edify the church, to let it grow? As we search through these scriptures, as we look at the idea of it doesn't matter what our backgrounds help us be who we are today. Even the bad parts of our past all influenced us to today. Today influences who we'll be tomorrow. Who will we be? Will we continue to serve God and as we go through this life? Will we continue to build one another up? Let's not evaluate ourselves based on each other. Let's evaluate, what am I able to do? Who am I? What gifts has God given me? And how am I using them? Even Paul said, I'm not worthy, but because of the grace of God, I am what I am. And he was thankful for that. And he was using his talents to help others. I encourage everyone to do the same. If anyone has need of the invitation, anyone has the need of prayers for the congregation, we offer those now while together we stand and sing.